How you doing, Rick?
Good, Megan. How about you?
I'm doing well. I love that shirt. It is totally spring fresh, and it is definitely an upgrade from your t-shirt. So I congratulate you. What is the
Growing up
significance of
now.
what is the significance of that shirt?
Well, I bought this shirt, a couple of years ago, right before the pandemic. And then, I sat home and drank margaritas and watched Netflix, all weekend long. Then the shirts didn't like me anymore.
The shirt didn't
What's
fit.
up? Yeah, they're like, hey, we don't like you anymore. So I've been back to the gym and working my butt off like a crazy person. And so I actually back and buttoned it today. And I can button my shirt. That's cool. I think I'll wear it.
Yay.
I know, right?
Those are, every win should be celebrated. And that is definitely a win. So
Yeah.
Congratulations.
I know, right?
All right. So we'll get down to the topic today. The topic today is closing costs. Closing costs. So people have to realize that when they're looking in their bank account and they're thinking about what their down payment is going to be, they have to also have some money in there for closing costs.
That's
and
right.
During a market that is more of a buyer's market than a seller's market, which is not the market that we're in, that you can ask for credits for closing costs, or you can even say, if the house was listed for 515, you could, or 500, you could offer 515 and have all your closing costs paid. But that's not on the table right now. And when it does become on the table, we will record something about it and we will explain it to people in that sense. So I have one way of saying the closing costs and you have another way of saying the closing costs. So I'll say my way and then you can say it in your better way. Okay. So what we call them are recurring and non-recurring closing costs. And what do you call them?
Well, that's true. It's very true. But there's closing costs are two types of closing costs. One-time items, which are escrow, title, appraisal, credit, that kind of stuff. Then there's the ongoing items, which are taxes and interest.
Right.
Insurance.
Yeah. So when you buy a house, you have cost,
right,
much like the seller has. So there's escrow fees, there's title fees, there's flood certification fees, there's the appraisal fee, the credit fee, the underwriting or points or whatever you've worked out. And those are all fees to pay to basically get the transaction done. And then there's another set of fees that I call the recurring closing costs. And you call it the ongoing costs, and that is your property insurance and your property taxes. And so typically when people look at their closing costs, I mean, because it's a big chunk of money, it's like 15, 20, 30 grand, depending on what, but what you have to realize is that a big chunk of that is paying for the property in the future, with the taxes and the insurance.
Yeah, so that's kind of a sticker shock thing for most buyers. They see the loan estimate and go, holy, what the heck's 15,000? Where's that? So, I mean, the question is, how do you get to that $15,000 number, right? And so I tell buyers the biggest piece of your closing costs is the taxes and insurance. So typically figure, depending upon when you close escrow, around 6 to 8 months on the taxes, and then 14 months on the homeowner's insurance. So if you look at an average house these days, you're talking upwards of 800 or so a month in taxes, maybe 1,000 a month. So right there, $7,000 or $8,000 oftentimes. Right. So typically your taxes and insurance run in the $6,000 to $8,000 range, $9,000 range, right? Yeah. And then you have your other closing costs, escrow, title, and so on. And so the question becomes, well, how do you get to that number on the other closing costs? And people get that confused because we'll send out the loan estimate and say, well, your escrow fees are too high or your title fees are too high. Well, we as a lender have the obligation to disclose the fees, even though they are not our fees.
Right.
So what we do when we open escrow is we get that fee breakdown from escrow. They tell us what the escrow fees are, the title fees, the recording fees, the notary fees, all those things. And we put that on the loan estimate. And then we disclose that to the buyer. So that's how we get those fees. They're not just some mystical out of the a number.
Yeah, I mean, and
Like-
your loan estimate in the beginning, when you open escrow, has to be pretty similar to the loan estimate at the end, right?
Thank you to Dodd and Frank, our good friends in Congress back
Yeah.
in the 2008 era. They wrote the rule book.
Right.
It's called cost to cure from a lending perspective, right? So as a lender, the reason why we're so tight on those closing costs is because when we disclose those closing costs, even though they're not our costs, if there's a more than a 10% variance on those costs, we as a lender pay the difference.
Right.
Right. So oftentimes lenders will over disclose a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you'd be surprised as a lender, we can spend upwards of $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 in 1 month just on cost to cure.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So it gets very expensive from a lending perspective. So yeah.
Yeah. So the estimate in the beginning will be real close, within 10% of the estimate at the end. And
Right.
what you're saying is that when you open escrow, you contact the escrow company, you ask them what their fees are so you can put everything on your disclosures.
That's correct. Yep.
Now, I always tell people that they're just a rough guesstimate for your non-recurring costs. It's about a percentage point. Would you say that?
Never thought about it in those terms.
Probably a little bit less.
I
because-
figured roughly 6 or 8 months, whatever the taxes are, and then about 14 months of homeowners insurance.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about the non-recurring costs.
Oh, non-recurring.
That's
I
good.
think probably, right around there. Yep, I'd say so, around 1%.
Yeah, so I think people watching this today, they don't have a property to run all the numbers on. They can at least say, well, it'll be about 1% plus 9 months of taxes and insurance in an account. And then that's how you set up to an impound account.
Exactly right.
Excellent. Now, all right, I think that's it. I was going to ask you one other question, but I was thinking I was going to ask you what part of the closing costs could be a tax write-off, but then I remembered that you are not a licensed tax professional and I should not ask you that question.
Oh, yes, I just kind of give advice on it,
I know, exactly. All right, Rick. Well, I think that does it for today. If anybody has any questions about closing costs, needs clarification, just shoot us a message and we will look forward to answering it for you.
We'll do it for sure. Thank you,
All
Mike.
right. Thanks, Rick. Keep up the good work. Love the shirt.
Thank you.
We'll see what you have next week.
We'll make it a plan.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. All right, Megan, I'll see you later.